Tonight, Amanda Waller throws the biggest twist of her entire life by stating that she actually doesn't like hurting people. All of the Forever Evil tie-ins end, meaning that DC has lost about half their publishing line, and World's Finest kind of just forgot to do part of their crossover event with Batman Superman. Oops. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 134 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and I am just now realizing how many books are ending at DC. Like, just this week, just in what I was handling this week, 7 different trades wrapped up. It was the end of 7 different trades. And that's not to say that all of them were canceled, because they weren't. Some of them ended on their own rights, such as like Animal Man and stuff like that. Some of them are just changing over creative teams. We're still getting future issues. Some of them still have another month in them. But like, so many things are ending at this period where Forever Evil is also wrapping up that it feels like a paradigm shift. It feels like, okay, if I didn't know what was coming next in the DC universe, this would be the point where I'm like, pre-Forever Evil, post-Forever Evil. But I do know what's coming next in the DC universe, and that is a meaningless distinction of pre and post Forever Evil. Like, it's the same exact crap before and after. It's just a bunch of different series are starting up, including weeklies. So get ready for that. Anyway, it's a long story short. Just wanted to say we do actually end up having final issues this week. A couple of those. I will go through the comics that we have on this week's episode just so I can tell you those. So we have, in no particular order, Forever Evil A.R.G.U.S, Forever Evil Rogues Rebellion, Suicide Squad, Amanda Waller, Batman the Dark Knight, Catwoman, Talon, Superman, Larfleeze, Red Lanterns, Aquaman, The Flash, World's Finest, All-Star Western, Teen Titans, and Justice League Dark. Out of those, Batman the Dark Knight and Talon are done. That's their final issues coming out this week. Teen Titans is on its second to last issue, and I think it was Flash. Yeah, Flash had Brian Buccellato's last issue this week, so we're getting a new writer on that with next month's issue. So a lot of endings, a lot of new beginnings, stuff like that. We also have that one shot of Suicide Squad, Amanda Waller. That's coming out, so technically that's ending as soon as it's starting. And then the Forever Evil events of A.R.G.U.S and Rogues Rebellion. Those are both ending as well. So that's a lot of things wrapping up. So we'll see what all comes out of it coming next month. But as it stands for this episode, it's already going to be a little bit packed, and I've already probably spent too long in this intro just jabbering on. So let's jump right on into it. Suicide Squad, Amanda Waller, #1, written by Jim Zub, art by Andre Coelho. So DC did 3 one-shots. We started with Joker's Daughter, went over to Lois Lane, and then like a month and a half later, now we're getting Amanda Waller. So what is this? It's just an Amanda Waller story. It's just kind of a, here's the kind of woman she is. So we open up with her on a military airplane. She's talking to some of the soldiers, and the soldiers are like, oh man, Amanda Waller, you're a legend. You're super cool. And she's like, cool, don't ask for my autograph. And she's just like enjoying herself there. And then all of a sudden she's approached by a doctor who's on board named Dr. A.R.G.U.S, and her secretary, I guess, maybe another doctor. Regardless, she's there to talk to him because he is apparently some like special geneticist who's done some research into like superhuman genes and whatnot. And she's just like, yeah, look, we're looking to control super beings, you know, that's kind of a thing the American government wants. And he's like, oh, I will not be part of this gulag. I know what you do about Task Force X. And he's just like, all right, well, it's not really a question. So, but then all of a sudden, before anything else, alarms start blaring, and the wing of this aircraft gets nicked by some major firepower. Plane's going down, everyone's freaking out. And Waller's like, all right, brace for impact. So they crash down into this snowy tundra area. But here's the thing. This is the middle of like an Arizona desert, and it's supposed to be very, very hot. So why is it icy right now? And as they come out of the plane, Waller's like, all right, claw out if you're conscious. We have Waller basically telling everybody, all right, nobody goes into panic mode. Nobody gets hit with like trauma or shock or anything like that. We got 2 soldiers left. We got Dr. Algo, his secretary, and me. That's the only people who are alive. So takes one of the soldiers, says, go inside, see if there's anybody else available. The other one, go look in the southwest area. That's where the shot came from. Doctors, I need you guys to pay attention here. And they're all very quickly realizing like, wait, it's snowy. Why is that? So there's no signal out here in the middle of the storm. Nobody has any idea where they're at. And Amanda immediately has to take stock of the situation. So there's a old grizzled soldier and a newbie there. And we say, all right, we're just going to have to start getting moving. We're going to move away from the area or the area where we saw the shot come from. We're going to move in the opposite direction. Grizzled soldier, you take point. Other one staying back. Let's go. But before they're able to do anything, another shot comes out. Waller and the grizzled soldier start shooting at it, and it turns out it is some form of a superhuman who's been firing off these shots from his body. And we see that the doctor is aware of this guy. His name is Krieger 3. He's a genetic experiment who went bad, and he thought he was dead. And Krieger's like, how dare you? You would like that, wouldn't you, doctor? I blame you for what's happened to me, and therefore I'm here to kill you. So at this point, he fires off a bunch of ice shards, so he's able to control both fire and ice. And they start embedding themselves into some of the soldiers' armor, but doesn't actually outright kill them. One bit of the narration here, because Waller is narrating the whole thing, says that Waller actually hates violence. Like, I'll just say it straight up. The whole point of the issue here is to give Waller's inner motivation saying of like, I don't like doing what I do. Like, I don't like being this person who has to make these tough calls, but, like, somebody has to. Somebody has to do the things that seem morally reprehensible for the greater good. And as much as I don't like violence and I don't like hurting people, and as much as I sit with this guilt of all the people who have died because of my decisions, I do it because someone has to. So that's the Waller we're getting from this. But either way, we see them trying to shoot Krieger, but they're unable to penetrate through like his big energy shots and stuff like that. The newbie soldier gets taken down by a fire blast, and they're like, oh, she's going to die. Shouldn't we go back for her? And Waller's like, nope, she made her sacrifice. Let's not let it be in vain. Let's go. Let's outrun this guy. So we see that he actually takes the energy out of her, and it freezes her body wholesale. So at this point, he calls up, Amanda's calling over the doctor being like, hey, give me a power set rundown. What can he do? And doctor's like, I don't know. First off, he should be dead. Like, straight up, foremost, he shouldn't be here anymore. So I don't know why he is. But secondarily, technically, his power set is that he's able to control energy, meaning that he can suck energy out of things and then expel it as he wishes. That's probably why the desert is all snowy. He probably took all of the heat from the New Mexico desert, which means he is ridiculously powerful right now. So yeah, we need to keep moving. But he doesn't have any powers outside of that. And Waller's like, cool, the snowstorm that's going on should keep us hidden from view if we play our cards right. So he fires off an energy shot again towards their direction. And Waller's like, oh, that's if he fires again, we're done for. But he doesn't. And Waller's like, wait a minute. He didn't fire another shot. I think he needs to take time to recharge between shots. So she gets the other soldier ready and says, once he fires the next one, we bust in, we start shooting. So he fires off another one. They come in, they shoot him, and they actually land a few shots, but he's able to put up an energy like force field sooner rather than later. And this is where he basically gives out his whole thing of like, don't you get it? Don't you understand? I was an innocent. I was a normal person. I was abducted by this doctor's crew and made to be this monster. And I can't turn this off either. Like I'm not allowed to be near anybody. It's him. He created the procedure. This is all his fault. And he says, you know, the lines here that resonate with Amanda a little bit of like, how can anyone use people like that and still call themselves a human being? So he fires off another energy shot because they overplayed their hand, ends up burning the grizzled soldier. So now it's just Waller, the secretary, and the doctor. And they start running their way through the snow. And then all of a sudden, a truck comes up out of nowhere, and the people are like, hey, you guys okay? We saw the smoke from the airplane crash. Hop in. And so everyone hops into the car, and Waller's like, these are innocent people. They aren't superheroes or scientists. They're not part of this fight. And this guy's going to keep on hunting down the doctor, so I can't let him go with them. So at gunpoint, to the doctor says, get out of the car. And everyone's like, okay, is this like a gang thing? What's going on here? So Waller drags the doctor out of the car, tells them, drive, keep driving. Once you get signal on cell phones, call people and let them know, like, we're here and what's going on. So they start driving away, but then immediately, Krieger, that's his name. Krieger blasts the car and just totally done for. And he's just like, no, oh God, they were innocent. How dare you? And he's like, well, stop running away. And as the doctor starts to run away, Waller just kneecaps him. It's just like, fine, we're not running. This is it. We make our final stand. So Dr. Algo makes his point. He's just like, look, we weren't told that you were innocent. We were told that you were all criminals, that anything we did to you was justified because you were the worst of the worst. And of course, Waller's sitting there like, okay, this is sounding pretty familiar. Yeah, I get all that. But doctor says it wasn't my decision, to which, of course, the Krieger's just like, oh, of course, there's always someone else to blame up the chain, but eventually it is going to be somebody's fault. So we see that the people are crawling out of the car. It seems like they're okay. Krieger picks up the doctor with some ice tentacles or whatever and says like, oh, I'm going to, this is going to feel great. I'm finally going to get my revenge or whatnot. And that's where Waller steps up saying like, hey, look, Krieger. And he's like, that's not my name. That's a code name. He's like, fine, what is your name? He's like, don't try to be like buddy with me. And he's just like, look, here's the thing. You want to kill him, but it's not going to make anything better for you. You're still going to have your problems. And he's just like, okay, but it's going to feel really good. Plus, he's not innocent. If he deserves this. And it's like, okay, well, nobody's innocent. Like, that's how it is. And he's like, right, all of us deserve to die. So Waller basically says, like, can I fix this? Is there any way I could save this situation? And she says, no, I don't think there is. So she goes over to the one soldier's pack of grenades, takes all the pins out, and runs towards Krieger, tackles him off of this like small cliff that's there, and it explodes. And you'd think Waller would be caught in that, along with the doctor, but no. Turns out, because of his energy absorption and he can't turn it off, he absorbs the explosion before it's able to do any real damage to Waller or the doctor, and it's so much that it ends up knocking him out. So as he's unconscious, Waller's like, look, there's no other way out of this. I got to do this. And he steps up and shoots Krieger in the head, finally ending it. And so everyone in the car managed to survive. Everyone's fine. The doctor, he's been kneecapped, but he's also fine. With the storm now starting to settle because Krieger's powers are out, the secretary is finally able to get a signal and calls over to someone, get some help for all of them. And Waller's like, yeah, all right, sounds good. And she asks, okay, but like, are you good? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. And we get one last little quote from James Allen, who says, who would accomplish little must sacrifice little. He who would achieve much sacrifice much. So I get the point of the issue. I understand it from the perspective of like, oh, okay, we're diving into the psyche of like, how could someone do such heinous things and still view themselves as the moral good? But I don't feel like it went far enough. Like, this was obviously a situation where Amanda was probably in the right. We have someone who's willing to kill innocents. We have someone who's, done some bad things otherwise. It still makes sense, the choices she made here. I feel like it's not morally gray enough for it to really come down on like, is Waller making the correct decision? The only thing that I will give it credit for is that it constantly gives a through line of her thought process. And through that, I think we actually do get a good glimpse at like whether or not she thinks she's able to find another way out. Like, it seems like she tries to put murder and violence and all that stuff as an option of last resort. And so when we see her saying like, is there any other way I can handle this that isn't going to result in me killing this guy? And we see her try to think through that. And she's like, nah, this is it. This is the only option we have, which I can appreciate as a character flaw, that she's like, nope, this, like, Superman would stop at the point of saying, no, I'm not going to kill. Amanda Waller's going to go that extra step of saying, like, if that's the last option, then yeah, I'm going to do it. So I think that it does a decent job in that way. Overall, I think this one's probably... It's probably like a 7.5. It's just shy of that 8, but I can't tell you exactly what it's missing. It just feels like it's not quite enough of putting her through the grinder of saying, I have to make these tough choices. Like, all the choices here, they don't seem that tough, all things considered. So yeah, 7.5, still very good, just not quite great. Forever Evil Argus number 6, written by Sterling Gates, art by Neil Edwards. So last issue, Steve Trevor got the lasso of truth from Cheetah, and then Dr. Light showed up and says, I gotta kill you now. So if you remember anything that happened like 2 issues ago, there was the green room where Etta and Obama are in there. And it's like a panic room while Forever Evil's going on. And we meet this man, who I believe is called the Green Man, and he's basically saying like, all right, Etta, let me fill you in on Argus, because Argus didn't just start when superheroes showed up. And she's like, but like the S in that means superhumans. He's like, only this time around. Argus has been around since the founding of America. And she pulls out some bracelet that he activates, and it gets a bunch of holograms up, and it says like, yeah, so that shot heard around the world that started the American Revolution, that was us. We did that back when we were known as the armed revolutionaries governing under secrecy. And then during the 1800s, we were the Anonymous Ranger Group of the United States, and we were trying to protect America's interests and blah, blah, blah. It turns out that Mr. Green here was trying to defend Lincoln, and he failed, and that's why Lincoln got shot. And he just says, yep, so we've always been around. We've always been protecting America. And Etta's like, all right, so you're the Illuminati. He's like, no, not technically. There was this group around the 1900s called the Crimson, and their whole thing was they wanted to bring about the apocalypse. They started messing with America, we stopped them, and they went away. But then superheroes showed up, and we realized they're going to be a problem, so that's why we made Argus. However, the Crimson and their Crimson Men are back again, and we think they're going to try to cause the apocalypse again with superhumans. So that's all happening right now. And Etta's like, cool, what do you need me for? And Obama jumps in and basically says like, now Etta, we need you to be something more. And I'm going to stop that now. But regardless, Mr. Green jumps in and says, you're going to be in charge of so much more than you could possibly understand, but we need you to keep Steve Trevor alive because we need men of action like that around. And then we see Steve Trevor lost in the black void where he's seemingly dead. And then the Weird Sisters come up, who he made a deal with way back in like issue 2, and they said, hey, we're here to collect. And he's like, oh, hold on, guys. I need to be able to take this weapon to Wonder Woman. That's the only reason I did all this. And they're like, that's not our fault, dude. We're here to collect. Like, we're taking you now. And they say that he should have had a life where, like, he was going to be recognized for all of his hard work and his efforts would be rewarded. And they are robbing him of that future. So what does that mean? I don't know. Even Steve Trevor's like, Wonder Woman told me all about you. You're just a bunch of like tricks and mirrors. You're not actually like that powerful to change fate. And he's like, try it. So all of a sudden, as they disappear, Steve's like, wow, I'm really cold all of a sudden. And when he wakes up, turns out he is encased in ice by Killer Frost, who defended him from Dr. Light's attack. She starts fighting against Dr. Light, saying like, look, I don't know who you are, but we're not enemies. And he's like, if you're defending Steve Trevor, yeah, we're enemies. So he breaks out of the ice. They keep making ice puns, which Killer Frost is like, I'm sorry, I don't even mean to half the time. And Dr. Light continues to attack him over and over again. And Steve's basically like, dude, I don't know what's going on, what's happening, but like, I'm trying, I want to help you here, Dr. Light. Come on. So eventually he comes up with an idea as to what he needs to do. And Dr. Light makes some hard light constructs of the crime syndicate, which attack Killer Frost. And she's like, oh, I can't absorb this type of energy. It's actually hurting me. So Steve grabs the lasso of truth, wraps it around Dr. Light's neck, and he gets thrown off, but it's just long enough for Dr. Light to realize, like, oh, I died. Like, I actually died. That wasn't like a temporary thing. I woke up, I was confused, but like, I was dead. oh God. And he starts getting real upset about that. So he just teleports out. And Steve Trevor's like, geez, all right, well, I was kind of hoping he'd stick around, but whatever. And Killer Frost asks, like, all right, so what just happened there? And he's like, weird sisters, memories. I don't know. It doesn't matter. He's like, okay, what memories, or is anything important? And we cut back to Trinity War, where apparently in the middle of the fighting, Steve and Wonder Woman were connected by the lasso of truth. And he said, tell me the truth, Diana. Do you love me? And she said, yeah, of course I did. But I moved on, and so should you. And that's where Steve's like, I'm good. So all of a sudden, Martian Manhunter starts screaming out in Steve Trevor's mind. He's like, hey, I think I'm out of the psychic prison I was in over in Justice League of America. Can you read me, Steve? And he's like, yeah, you're a bit loud, but what's up? And in between the panels, he explains this whole thing, and he's just like, right, Roger, got it. So Steve grabs the lasso of truth, and he's like, all right, let's go, Killer Frost. Let's go save the world. And he says, like, I'm going to rebuild Argus, and I'm going to be saving the world. We're not dealing with Amanda Waller anymore. It's going to be better, stronger. No matter what, Argus is coming back. And then we get a little epilogue back in the green room. Etta and Obama are gone, so it's just Mr. Green. He walks over to a door and pulls out a mask of the Crimson Men, and he puts it on, and he's like, well, that went pretty well. And as he walks to a different room, we see the people who were part of the Crimson Group being like, yep, Dr. Light, he played his part, he did what he needed to do. Yeah, the Crimson Men will be successful. And Mr. Green says, yep, we are going to rebuild Argus to follow Crimson Men ideology, and they won't even know, all the better. We will take down Argus once and for all. So, they're Hydra. Crimson Men are Hydra. Like, straight up. It's not much of an ending. I mean, here's the thing. It's obviously going to be a part of Forever Evil, like, the main book. It's going to be playing into issue 7 there. But, like, that doesn't make this any more satisfying of a tie-in series. The fact that, like, even the independent character's plot didn't really end, unless you view it from the viewpoint of him trying to get over Diana was his plot, in which case it still didn't end because he's not over her. So in the end, I think the only thing that's really accomplished is let's get Steve Trevor from here to here with the lasso of truth. That's it. And you didn't need 6 issues of a miniseries to do that. I will say there were points where it was fun, but this one definitely felt like it was all right, I guess we'll do something with, like, Steve Trevor was not locked up in Firestorm, therefore we had to have some series to say, where the hell is he? And this is as good a place as any, I guess. So all in all, I probably would give it I'd give it like a 6. It's just, as a capper to a miniseries, it didn't really work. And the miniseries as a whole also didn't work. It's just kind of a, well, get this if you're buying everything for Forever Evil, I guess. Forever Evil Rogues Rebellion number 6, written by Brian Buccellato, art by Scott Hepburn. Last issue, the Rogues arrive back in Central City, and then, because of shenanigans of the crime syndicate, literally everybody they fought along their entire trek here shows back up and is ready to kill them. So we see as they are going through and being kicked around by all of the villains around here, we have Pied Piper doing the narration. He's like, I was never really one of the rogues. Like, I hung around with them for a while, and I always felt like I was an outcast. Maybe it was because I was gay, but, like, then one time I told them I was gay, and they didn't care. So it clearly wasn't that. But then they did kind of kick me out when they realized that my partner was a cop, and that was what really caused some friction there. So yeah, I never really was one of the rogues, and I realized that it wasn't even because of that. It was just because I didn't like being a criminal, so I became a vigilante, and now I am Pied Piper again. And right now he's put in charge of watching over Lisa, who is, I guess, in a mattress store, as best I can tell. And he's like, look, Lisa, I gotta go. The whole city's being torn apart by these villains. The rogues are going down. What's the point of saving you if there's nothing for you to wake up to? So here's hoping you're going to be okay. And we see, you know, Weather Wizard, Trickster, and Mirror Master out there trying to fight whoever they can. Mirror Master's taking on Parasite, Trickster's taking on Grodd, and Weather Wizard's taking on literally everybody else. So Trickster calls in being like, I think I'm a little outclassed here. Weather Wizard, do you want to, like, trade? Do you want to take the super fast, super angry gorilla? And he's like, nah, I'm good, man. But we see Pied Piper jumps in and he uses his... I'll be honest, I don't know Pied Piper's full abilities. I know there's mind control, but apparently there's also supersonic blasts from his flute. So he uses that to disperse some of the people that were fighting against Weather Wizard there. Mirror Master comes in and he's like, bro, you're supposed to be watching Lisa. And he's like, I'm sorry, you guys need help. I'm here to help. So let's just run with it. And he basically says, all right, well, let's take shelter in the mirror world. And that's when Mirror Master reveals, like, no, I can't. It's unstable. I can't do it. So at this point, Parasite comes just stomping up and he's like, hey, I got hit by your Sonic Blast. It tasted good. Give me some more. So he keeps on eating up all of Pied Piper's Sonic Blasts. And as Grodd is about to kill someone, I think it might be like Gizmo or something, he hears Pied Piper's flute and he's like, I don't like that music. Cut that out right now. And he goes to attack Pied Piper, to which Piper then uses his mind control on Parasite, who has absorbed all these blasts, to fight against Grodd. And finally, it's a little bit more of an equal fight there. So we see the rest of the rogues are still surrounded by all the rest of the people that they were fighting against. And we see Pied Piper's music is spreading out over the city to all the people who are scared and they're all concerned as to what's going to happen. And it also reaches Lisa inside the mattress store. And wouldn't you know it, at the very end when it says Mirror Master saying like, well, this is it. I hope people remember us, that we didn't go down with the crime syndicate. We fought against them. We did everything we could to be decent people here. That's when Lisa wakes up. She becomes Golden Glider again. And she comes in and she's like, hey, everyone, I'm here to help. So I don't know what happened to the people that were surrounding them. Like, they just suddenly disappear when Glider shows up. And she's like, all right, Mirror Master, I need you to make a mirror. And he's like, I can't. The crime syndicate messed with my powers. And they're like, no, they didn't. It's all just in your head. Make a big mirror. And so he does make a big mirror. Weather Wizard makes a hurricane to push every one of the villains into the mirror. Glider turns them intangible so they aren't affected by the winds. And then Trickster's like, all right, cool. What do I do? What do I do? And as they're all into the mirror dimension, Trickster launches his fist out and shatters the mirror into a million pieces, thus trapping all of these villains in the mirror dimension. And they say like, hey, we did it, we won. And then they look around the city and see it's totally destroyed, and it's like, oh, maybe, you know, Pyrrhic victory at best. So Mirror Master's finally able to give the kiss to Lisa. They're happy they're together now. Trickster's like, oh, geez, I could use a beer. So Pied Piper goes off, hugs his boyfriend. Everyone else around the city comes out and they're like, Rogues, you saved us. Thank you so much. And one little girl's like, what if they come back? And Mirror Master steps up and like, oh, well, we'll be here to kick their asses some more. So final page is everyone standing together along with the memory versions, the Force ghosts of Captain Cold and Heatwave. And it's just like, yeah, you know, we're not killers. We fought against the crime syndicate. We repel them off. We're going to save this city. We're going to be better than anyone's ever been before, blah, blah, blah. We're the rogues. So, yeah. I'll be honest, out of all the Forever Evil, like, tie-in series, Arkham City, A.R.G.U.S, and then this one's the best. This one actually feels like it had a purpose, it had a drive, it had a reason for being told. I initially thought that the core concept of it was, this is the tour around the DC universe. We're going to Metropolis and Gotham, and we're just showing, like, here's all the things happening during Forever Evil in all these different cities. But in reality, while it may be that, it also is a very good story for pointing out the rogues are not evil. They are villains, they are antagonists, they do bad things, but they aren't evil. They still understand a code of ethics. And I think that anybody who is looking to get into Flash and wants to try to understand who the rogues are, this is actually a pretty good book to lead them to, because while it does take a few of them off the table, it does, you know, make Captain Cold over elsewhere, I think that it does a good job of explaining, here's each of the rogues, here's their powers, and here's their general moral statement of what they want to do. They may be self-serving, but they're not evil. So yeah, overall, I'd say this one's probably, it's a little bit saccharine for me at the end of just like, yeah, we're the rogues. We're isn't that great? But honestly, I think it's earned it more than anything else. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5. And yeah, we'll see. I don't think this one's going to tie into Forever Evil, like leading into that series anymore, but maybe in Flash it'll give the rogues a new standing where they're able to be heroes every once in a while. Justice League Dark number 29, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Vicente Cifuentes and Tom Derenick. So this is the final part, finally, of Forever Evil Blight. In the last part, I think it was Pandora, Constantine said, hey, Faust has all of the knowledge of all the sorcerers in the entire world, and he's ready to remake reality in his image. I'm going to take that from him and do it instead. So we open up in Nanda Parbat, and I think it's Zatanna doing the narration, basically saying like, yeah, this place, as far as I've known it, has always sucked, but it does have like some good spirits down in the old magic, like deep in the basement. So there is a core of hope, but we don't know that yet, because right now, bad things are happening. And we see Constantine standing over the body of Faust. Pandora's like, what are you doing, man? He's like, I'm going to do the same thing he was doing, but I'm going to do it like better. I'm going to restore the world to as it should be. And Zatanna's like, what's going on up there? What's happening? She's unable to see the control room. And Constantine is standing right next to her as well. And she's just like, all right, well, everyone's still wrapped up in the machine. It's still like causing problems. So we got to save them. And she's like, yeah, all right, so we'll do that. But first I need you to answer questions for me. How are you up there and down here at the same time? Is this like a duplication spell? What's going on? And Constantine's like, oh, you know I would never do that. The last time I did a doubling spell, it almost killed me. I'm not going to do it again. And whoever's up there, it must be a fraud, a fake. And Zatanna's like, all right, look, we'll sort this out later. So at this point, she doesn't believe him. And as he's making suggestions on what to do, she blasts him with magic. And Constantine's just like, hey, look, I swear I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for the world. And Constantine basically says, I'm going to sacrifice myself to save the world. That's the point here. That's what I'm going to do. So Zatanna says like, what? Why? And it's just like, well, I was willing to sacrifice the world to save you, and I realized now that was wrong. So yeah, I've got all of this power inside of me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make things right. So he's planning on taking all of the magical energy that's inside of him, redistributing it out to all the people who have been chained up, and then that will kill him, but they will all be fine. And he basically says like, all right, I'll die. It'll be a matter of minutes, but like, there's no other way. And then the other Constantine comes down and just be like, hey, get away from my woman, you bastard. Who the hell are you even? And he blasts away the other Constantine saying, oh, I'm not going to let you stop me. And he, in his dying words, as he gives all the energy back to all the sorcerers, says, I love you, Z. And Zatanna says no. And we see him crying. He sends out all the energy back to everybody. And he falls down dead. And the other Constantine stands above him just being like, hey, I told you before, that's not me. That's a fraud. I don't know what that's about. And we see it decay into a demonic form. And it turns out, back when, before, like as Blight was beginning, and Constantine had all of these like mental things of like little demons attacking him, one of them got out, turned into actual Constantine, and then for some reason, his love of Zatanna was enough to transform this little demon goblin into a real fully fledged human. So, the power of love, everybody. So everybody gets off their wheels and they come and they look and they're like, oh, he saved us. He did this all. He made the greatest sacrifice out of love. And that love was like inside of Constantine. But then why is Constantine himself being such a prick all the time? So at that point, they don't have much time to think. The sons of Trigon who came in to help, they storm in and they're like, hey, seems like everything was taken care of. Now we're going to kill you guys and take you for Trigon. So that's what we're going to do now. And they steal all of Faust's Hellspawn as well. So a big fight breaks out. Everyone starts battling against each other. Zatanna looks at Constantine, and Constantine is just still baffled and awestruck that this version of himself was willing to sacrifice himself for the world. He, like, can't figure that out. And then he just teleports away. And Zatanna's like, you son of a... We're in the middle of a fight, and you just leave. You are so self-serving and arrogant. But she's unable to do anything at the moment because, again, she's still in a fight. So it looks like the fight's going on. They managed to take the one, like, main son of Trigon and, like, bash him through a few walls. But he's unfazed, and it's just like, oh, is that the best you can do? And then all of a sudden, Nanda Parbat starts, like, shaking. And everyone's like, what's going on here? And it turns out that when Zoriel had his wings ripped off, apparently days ago, I thought it was hours, but apparently this has been going on for days. It allows for some sort of connection with divine energy, blah, blah, blah. All of the good magic down in the basement of Nanda Parbat is coming out through the feathers of his wings, and they are essentially going to purify Nanda Parbat, which means picking it up and moving it into a different dimension. And everyone's like, that's going to kill all of us, so we got to teleport out of here now. By the way, Frankenstein's here. I don't know, like, I don't think that was ever brought up, but there's just one panel here of Frankenstein in the crowd, and then nothing else. So, Phantom Stranger's like, I can't teleport that many people out. It's too much. I don't have that much energy in me. And so Zatanna says, well, good thing I do. I'm much more powerful. And so she teleports everybody out, and Nanda Parbat explodes, and, like, is now just a crater of lava where it used to once be. So it's sent over to another dimension. So everyone's on the mountain next door, and they realize, like, oh, we did it. We saved the day, and, like, everything else there. And Nightmare Nurse comes up being like, hey, you did better than Constantine, your boyfriend, could have ever done. He's like, oh, it's not my boyfriend. He's a dick. He sucks. So at that point, Phantom Stranger points out that there's going to be repercussions for this, for using that much magic. Oh, it's going to have some consequence. And she's like, well, I saved everybody, so it's well worth it. So then we cut to the House of Mystery, where Constantine's just enjoying a bath. And Zatanna just busts down the door and just like, how dare you leave us in the middle of that fight? What in the hell is wrong with you? And he's like, oh, you know me. I'm self-serving. I'm arrogant. I'm stupid like that. Clearly, that's what I would do. I'm just going to leave. And she just picks him up out of the bathtub, throws him through a wall, and just like, nah, get out. And he's like, what do you mean get out? The House of Mystery is my house. I'm bonded with it. Look what I can do. And he starts like making the house do something, but the house doesn't respond. And Zatanna's like, yeah, the house realizes you're an ass and is now saying that it belongs to me. So I took the house from you in the divorce. Get out. And he's like, fine, whatever. Screw you. I didn't need this house anyway. I don't need anybody. I don't need you. And he storms out. And Zatanna says that this is the story of how her world died and was born again. So I'm really happy Blight is done, because I feel like that was 4 plots wrapped into one, like, event. It just kept going. Yeah, no, I mean, this issue was fine, I guess. It is weird to me that Zatanna is given such a massive power surge. Like, she says that's just normal for her, that she's that much stronger than, like, Phantom Stranger and Pandora and all that, which seems weird, you know? I never considered her as that powerful, but all in all, I'd say this one, for wrapping up the event, setting characters in a new status quo. We got Zatanna back on the whole Justice League Dark is back. Constantine's once again off the crew, but then they now have the House of Mystery. It changes things, I would say, for the better. Puts people in interesting positions. I'm going to say this is a 7.5, but I do want to make clear that Blight as a whole is way too overlong. It should have ended like 6-7 issues ago. This is an entirely different place from the beginning of the arc, and I don't think it all needed to be here. So 7.5 for this issue, but Blight as a whole, like 5.5 max. World's Finest number 21, written by Paul Levitz and Greg Pak, art by R.B. Silva. This is part 4 and the finale of a First Contact, the crossover with Batman Superman. But here's the thing, part 3 didn't get released. Just not here. There were delays, and part 3, which is in Batman Superman, is actually like a month and a half late. So just pretend we had part 3, and then we'll go into this. So we have Batman, Superman, Huntress, and Power Girl all standing in front of a portal that is apparently pointed at Earth 2. And it's a mess. It's all fire and destruction and whatnot. The Kaiser of Gamora is just like, yeah, man, I've been talking with Darkseid on the other side, and he's promising me power and all this stuff as long as I can get you through, Power Girl. And we see that he's basically going to her just being like, yeah, it's your world. Go through. It's totally there waiting for you. And she is upset, to say the least. She goes after the Kaizen, and it's just like, oh, you're nothing like the boy I knew back on my world. And he's just like, no, clearly I'm not. I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. So as he's standing in front of the portal, he gets super charged up with like Omega energy, starts, his skin is changing and whatnot. And just like, oh, I've been offered greatness and I take it. And as Helena and Karen are both looking at this, Batman and Superman are like, I'm remembering something about Earth 2, remembering back to their very first adventure in the book, but they just can't place it yet. But it's taking them out of the game a little bit. Their minds are jumbled enough that they're not really interacting with this. So Kaizen grabs Power Girl and just starts dragging her towards the portal, and she's just like, nah, I'm not going to be sacrificed, and just throws him into it instead. But she's like, I'm going in on my own terms. If that's our world, I'm going in because I want to. And she starts zooming forward. Helena kicks her in the face and says, like, dude, we don't even know if that's our world. It's on fire. It's destroyed. Like, it could be anywhere else. If there's one alternate universe, there may be several. So Kaizen then he picks up Huntress and throws her instead. Superman zooms in, saves her from being there. And then Karen suplexes Kaizen through the portal, saying like, all right, you go through first. So Batman's like, that was stupid. Why would you send him over there? Like, clearly that's where he wants to be. You Kryptonians, man. So at that point, Karen's like, okay, but like, seriously, we should go through the portal. It could be our ticket home. And Helena's like, we don't even know that's our world. Like, let's not. By the way, we've been looking for this tech forever. How did Kaizen get the technology? And Superman says like, oh, it's, Gamora's super famous for its high-tech stuff. It doesn't make sense that they have that stuff. They had nanites as well. By the way, Karen, I've scanned your body. You're free of nanites now. And Karen's like, okay, gross. Don't x-ray vision my body without my permission. Secondly, yeah, I'm going through there. We're done here. So she's about to go through, and Helena's like, all right, look, whether we're right or wrong, whether that is our Earth, I'm sticking with you. So they're about to go through the portal, and as they do, a giant hand pops through. It's Kaizen. He's been even more supercharged, and he's like, I'm here to beat the ever-loving crap out of you. Look at this power I've been given by Darkseid. So Superman comes in. He's ready to start throwing punches, and Karen's like, he says like, oh, You're the one who we need, Karen. He wants you. And Karen's like, what do you mean, he? And Kaizen kneels before the portal, and out comes evil Superman from Earth 2. And Karen's just like, Cal? What? And then he's accompanied by a bunch of parademons. And we see that, it's basically a big fight where Power Girl is basically like, is that you, Cal? Is that really him? And Kaizen's like, yeah, no, totally. He called me across these universes. It's totally him. He wants you to come back with him. And we see Superman and Batman, Helena fighting against parademons. Batman and Helena actually do like a bunch of team-up moves together, to which they fist bump afterwards, and he's just like, yeah, pretty well done. And Helena's like, yeah, well, even if you're not the real Batman, you got some good moves yourself. Superman, because he had nanites in him, apparently he's a little bit powered down at this point. So Parademon's actually causing him some trouble, but he manages to flip one over and just throw him into the ground. So I guess that's enough. Meanwhile, evil Superman's like, hey, Kara, come on through. And she's like, you can't be Cal, you're evil. And he's like, you were my secret weapon back before the war. And she's like, you are Cal. So she's about to go through, but then Helena shoots the portal, like, grid, whatever you want to call it, and it explodes and the portal is no more. And Karen's pissed, just like, why did you do that? And he's just like, dude, he was evil. What do you mean, why did I do that? And it's just like, you stupid, that was definitely our Earth. Like, he's the only one who knew I was the secret weapon. There was no other person that could have been. That was our world. And Helena's like, oh God, that's awful. And so Superman comes in, he's just like, well, I mean, we could try rebuilding it. And she's like, yeah, no, great. Clearly, we have had trouble building that ourselves. It's in a million pieces. Clearly, you guys are going to be able to do it, you stupid idiots. So Batman and Superman, I think it looks like they have the body of Kaizen and they're just dragging it away. And they're just like, well, we'll deal with this. Hopefully we hear from you one day soon. And World's Finest are just like, nah, we're done with this. This crossover's done. So back on Earth 2, sorry, I guess it wasn't Kaizen's body. That or it was a robot. It might have been a robot because we see Kaizen back in human form here. He's dropped off into like this pit and Superman's like, you failed me. How dare you? Now you will be punished. And Kaizen is set on fire and he's like, I thought this world was supposed to be great, something for me to conquer, but it's hell. And he's burning. So yeah, I'll be honest. Even without part 3, like, this feels like how it was always going to go. Like, even where we left off in part 2, it's like, yeah, and then they're all at the portal, clearly. So, I can't say it's not predictable. Beyond that, I think that there is some good points to it. The idea that finally they got a portal home, and it's just been destroyed for the greater good, quote unquote. But, yeah, I don't know. It just seems... I think my biggest problem isn't with the World's Finest crew, it's with Batman Superman. Because while this is the World's Finest book, and I'm sure in part 3, when we get that, it will have more for Batman and Superman to do. Here they felt pretty useless, all things considered. And I think I would have liked them to play a bigger part in wrapping up the plot. Even if it's not their book, they should still be doing something, you know? Instead of just sitting in the background being like, yeah, you got this. You go girls. So yeah, overall, I'm going to give this one like 6.5. It's got some good swings. I like the fact that they managed to bring up the idea of they had a portal home and they lost it, so able to take things in a new direction there. But yeah, overall, this First Contact crossover has kind of just been crap throughout, not even counting the fact that they skipped an entire issue and then are just like, oops, it'll come out eventually. So yeah, 6.5, not great. Batman the Dark Knight number 29, written by Gregg Hurwitz, art by Ethan Van Sciver and Jorge Lucas. So last issue we had Abraham Langstrom, the father of Kirk Langstrom, got the Man-Bat serum. He's even more evil as Man-Bat, and when Batman tried to give him the antidote, he got shaken off of Man-Bat and is now plummeting down to the city. And last issue I said, but wait a minute, Batman can glide. And this issue decided to say, oh, right, forgot about that. So as Batman is plummeting down to the city, he says that his cape is all shredded up and it's not able to fly, which I checked last issue. It was not. It just straight up wasn't, but now it is. And so he's plummeting down to the city. So he has 2 grappling hooks inside of his, like, gauntlets, his wrist things, and he fires them out at the buildings next to him as he starts coming down into the city. And it almost tears his arms out of his socket, he says, but his life depends on it, so he manages to hold on that way. So back at the Batcave, he's getting stitched up by Alfred, and we just have a little sequence where, as he's getting stitched up, Bruce says, ouch, and Alfred's like, oh my god, did Batman just say ouch? Is he a little baby who says owie? I'm gonna call the press and say that Batman says ouch. And it's all played for a joke, but like, I don't get it. So then he goes over to Gordon, And Gordon's like, hey, look, I know that you know this is Abraham Langstrom, but like, you don't have enough evidence and he's rich and powerful. And what am I supposed to say? That a guy dressed like a bat just told me it's correct? And Batman's like, well, I mean, there's better ways to phrase it than that. And he's like, no, no, no. You're a vigilante. Go do your vigilanteing. And Batman's like, I'm not sure that's a verb. So, and by the way, any like jokes I'm adding in here, I'm not adding in. They're all in the book. Like this is for some reason, every like other page has a punchline. So at the Langstrom mansion, Batman just shows up and Abraham's like, yeah, I heard that you just show up in places. Anyway, you don't have any evidence against me. And that's the whole reason that you're here and not some cop. And you're not going to catch me slipping because I'm super smart and intelligent and awesome. So go away, Batman. And Batman's like, well, just one thing. Theoretically, if you were Man-Bat, you're attacking homeless people because they wouldn't be missed, right? And he's like, theoretically. He's like, well, that's where you made a mistake because I missed them. So we get a little bit of how Langstrom got a whole bunch of stuff to his car done, including a GPS upgrade, and Batman knows that he was casing out this homeless shelter somewhere in Gotham. So he's like, all right, well, that's clearly where he's going to hit next. So he goes to Kirk's lab and is like, yo, I need a better way to apply the antidote. And I'm sorry for breaking into your window last time. It's hard going up the escalator dressed like this. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you. My father's better than me in every way. And Batman's like, I have an idea. So we see Abraham's doing his pre-Man-Bat ritual. He gets out the syringe, injects himself, turns into Man-Bat, and flies out towards Gotham. We see there's a homeless shelter called The Hill, which is where Batman saw him staking out. And as they're all getting ready for bed one night, Man-Bat just crashes in through the ceiling, and this strange man in a large hat and a very conspicuous beard shows up and tells everybody, oh, get out, he can't get through the doors of the cafeteria. But not everybody can get out in time, and one man is lunged at, and this strange man with the beard jumps in the way. And wouldn't you know it, it's Batman. He's wearing a disguise, and he allows Man-Bat to puncture his skin and start drinking his blood. And of course, the idea he had is, well, if I can't penetrate Man-Bat's hide, he can penetrate my skin, and therefore I have the antidote in my blood. So he gives enough blood that he is about to pass out. He's like, just gotta hold on a little. Oh God, I'm getting woozy. But eventually we see that he drinks enough blood where Batman does pass out, but Man-Bat loses his form. He is hit with the antidote, and he transforms back into Abraham. Batman gets up, and he's like, hey, looks like you slipped up. So he arrests Abraham, gets the GCPD in there. And then we cut to the court case where the jury's standing up saying like, we find him not guilty because he's temporarily insane. And Abraham came up with this whole backstory of like, I don't know who drugged me, but of course I was insane. I was a Man-Bat. So whatever. And then we see all these reporters saying like, oh, well, aren't you worried about the massive amount of money you're forced to pay to the victims? He's like, it's $30 million. Who cares about that? Like, I'm not going to get sued by any of them because they're all homeless. And then we see a little homeless girl come up and say, you killed my daddy. And for some reason that sits with Abraham. He's super upset about that. So then we get just the final pages of Batman, or sorry, of, actually it's Abraham talking. And he's like, oh, people understand that, you know, I did what I had to do, blah, blah, blah. I'm a modern day overlord. I keep on looking for vulnerabilities, but I wait and I watch, and the city, it watches me back. And we see standing outside of Abraham's mansion is Batman, just glaring him down. And that is the series. Yeah, that's the final issue of Batman the Dark Knight. I'm glad Gregg Hurwitz is so into Man-Bat. It must be nice to have something that you're that into, because there was a lot of Man-Bat here. I didn't dislike this issue. It did definitely feel very rushed. It felt like we kind of just wrapped it up like just in a neat bow. And even then, it feels like several of the pages are just kind of like whatever. We had a double page spread for Batman like hanging between the buildings by the grappling hooks. It kind of felt like there wasn't enough to fill the issue. You know, it felt like we were just like, all right, well, maybe if we had another issue, we could add another subplot or something. But because we just got to wrap this up, we're just going to make it very clear. Here's how Batman tracked him down. Here's how he came up with the idea for the thing. And we just very quickly, boom, 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 done. So all in all, I'd say it's probably like a... I would give it a 7, but I'm going to give it a 6.5 because the art is just a little bit shaky as well. Maybe that's because there's 2 artists. I'm not sure. It just... I don't know. It didn't go out on a bang. It went out on like a, yeah, I guess that may as well be how it ends. Catwoman number 29, written by Sholly, Fisch, art by Patrick Olliffe. We get a little guest spot here where it's a standard Catwoman story. We open up in media res. She's flying out through a window and she's like, yep, that's me. Bet you wonder how I got here. And then we cut back to about an hour and a half earlier. And she explains that there is this medical company. They came up with a new chemo drug that has like 0 side effects. And Wayne Tech immediately came in and just bought them up. And this is the last night before the merger finalizes, and therefore the CEO, who's taken a huge payout, just like, hey everybody, thank you for everything. You've really done great work here. Everyone enjoy yourselves, whatever. And we see that Selena is here and she's trying to blend in. She's like, oh, hey, I've seen you around. And she's talking to this one guy at the bar. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm from R&D. That's my department. And as the CEO is giving his big speech, we see that she has grabbed this R&D guy's champagne glass and, like, pocketed it and taken it away. And when the guy turns back around, he's like, oh, man, I was talking to a pretty girl and now she left. So we see that she makes her way deeper into, like, the building. And she notices security cameras that are like aiming the whole way back into this R&D department because she was hired to get something. And it's implied that it's the chemotherapy drug. So she gets on her Catwoman stuff. And she says, if I knock out the camera, it's only going to send security guards. But if I knock out the light, that'll send a janitor to replace the light. So she knocks out that. However, a security guard is still sent regardless because I guess there is no janitor or it's a late night or whatever for them. So security guard we see is being sent out there. Meanwhile, she uses a smartphone to record the hallway that she's planning on walking down, and then she puts a loop recording of that in front of the other camera. So she's like, all right, 2 down. But this is a super open hallway that just seems rife for booby traps. So she puts on her special goggles or whatever and sees that there's a laser grid and pressure plates and all this other stuff. So she does a whole bunch of jumping around. And of course she makes it to the other end. But on the other end is a fingerprint scanner, which is totally unpickable. She can't get into it. Except for that she got that champagne glass from earlier. And she just says, that's why I had a specially made phone that's able to scan and lift and rescan in fingerprints off of glasses. You know, normal iPhone stuff. So when she does finally get into the R&D room, she's like, yeah, there's no cameras in here because they didn't... If they did end up getting hacked, they didn't want anything inside this room to get out. So she busts into the room that has the chemotherapy thing. She gets it out of the glass container. And then all of a sudden the alarm goes off. She's like, crap, I don't think that was me. But regardless, I got to go. So security guard's standing there at the door saying freeze. She manages to whip the gun out of his hands, but he gets a hand on her. So she takes another one of the drugs that's nearby and throws it at the guy. Just smashes it on him. And immediately he starts transforming into this like giant roided out dude. And he just starts running, yelling, and smashing at Selena. And she's just like, all right, what the hell is going on here? So she manages to jump over the guy and tries to leave the room. He throws down a bookshelf in her way. So she's like, all right, well, no matter how big you are, you still have to breathe. Puts a whip around his neck, and he just uses that to throw her around the room some more. More security guards show up, and so she uses that as an escape, like a distraction, to be able to get out of the area. And as she's doing so, she's like, okay, this isn't going exactly according to plan. She makes her way back out into the main room, and the big dude just follows her and starts smashing up like the whole party. And we see there's a young girl at this party for some reason. She falls down to the ground. She's about to get trampled. Catwoman swoops in, picks her up, and says, all right, if this guy is after me more than anything else, I need to be the distraction to get all of these other people out of here. So she starts taunting him and like hiding behind the bar, doing everything he could until it looks like she's trapped. There's no way out. And then all of a sudden the dude just falls flat on his face. Turns out that the scientist from earlier made his way back to the lab and got like every sedative they had and just jabbed it into his back. They have like 7 doses. And Catwoman's like, oh, hey, thanks for the assist. And he's just like, well, hold on. You stole our chemo drug. What are you talking about? And she's like, oh, gotta go. So she jumps out the window. That's exactly where we opened up. And she's like, well, you know, a pretty average night, but I couldn't possibly say no to this buyer. There's no way that I could have turned down this job. So she leaps over some rooftops, and as she makes her way onto one, Batman's standing there. And he's like, so what do you got to say for yourself? And she's like, here you go. And it turns out Batman is the one who hired her to get the chemo drug out. And she's like, okay, but like, why? And more importantly, why did you want me to smash that other drug? Because it turns out the one that she smashed on the guy, that was the thing that Batman actually wanted. He was like, look, Bruce Wayne is planning on buying this thing tomorrow. We have all the notes. We'll be able to remake this chemo thing, no problem. But that extra steroid thing that you had, it was a problem. And the fact that it was in development is something that we had to stop immediately. I'm having you get the chemo because people will think that that was the reason why they were stolen from. And they won't even notice that the steroid was gone. So yeah, this whole thing was just using you the whole way. And she's just like, I can't believe you pulled that over on me. So she gives him a slap and then says like, well, still, I guess we can make up a little bit if you want. And he's just like, yeah, no, bye. And she says, all right, well, you owe me now. And I'll collect one day, as she flies off into the city. Nice little wonder. Good little shot. I will say I didn't see the twist coming there that the steroid was the actual thing, because why would I suspect that Batman would be stealing the chemo drug, you know? And I did a very poor job of explaining that, the reasoning as to why, but it makes sense in the book. It makes sense as to why, like, for insurance purposes, and like they didn't have any notes on the story. It was all very hush-hush. So it makes sense that all they had to do was smash it, and then Bruce Wayne would come in and be like, well, we're not working on that anymore. Let's move over to this chemo thing. So, no, it's an interesting story. Best thing out of Catwoman probably in the past year and a half, so I'll give it that. All in all, 7.5. It's just a nice little one and done. Doesn't really take more to it. It's perfectly adequate. Talon number 17, written by Tim Seeley, art by Jorge Lucas. So last issue, we had Talon and Anya invading a laboratory looking for a way to revive Calvin. Lord Deathman is there, Damien Dark is there. It's a whole thing, but it ended with Damien Dark flooding the caves with some sort of gas in order to kill everybody. So we open up in the caves, and Calvin's just making out with Anya. And the narration says, oh, he's providing her oxygen because he's dead and doesn't need the oxygen, and he can just put it into her lungs, because why not? So that gives her a few more moments to breathe. Lord Deathman, who was in the caves, jumps in, and he's like, hey, everyone, Lord Deathman's here. And then he just falls down flat on his face, dead. And Calvin's like, I don't know what that was about, but there's an opening over here. So he goes out. We see Anya's managing to survive. Casey's still on the comm saying like, okay, yeah, it's dissipating. What the hell's going on where you guys are? And then we cut over to the lab of Dr. Dark, and he's like, oh, that's a Talon. That's a thing with like, you know, they're immortal. They can survive from any wound. Perfect. It's a perfect birthday gift. So at that point, there's a Phoenix defense initiated, which Anya says they're going to cleanse the whole thing with fire defense protocol. So yeah, we need to get out there and stop it. And then Casey gets on the comm saying, yeah, good idea. However, I've got some info about Lord Deathman. He's a Batman Inc. villain. He was launched into space by Batman. And also he's like a homicidal maniac. And Calvin's like, well, can't have him running around. And Anya tells him, like, that's not the... We're here in order to figure out how to get you to be mortal again. He's like, I can't let that murderer go free. So he goes back in the cave. Lord Deathman, he just... I'm going to skip over most of them. But he never stops making jokes. Like, he is so Deadpool, I can scarcely describe it. So, yeah, he steps up and he's like, well, you've been drained of all your blood. What are you going to do now, Lord Deathman? He's like, oh, I'm going to Disneyland. And then Calvin jumps in, stabs him in the back. And he's like, oh, well, it's obvious that you haven't killed very often because you missed my main arteries. So you're not League of Assassins. So what are you, Mr. Birdman? And they start fighting. It's pretty much evenly matched here. We see them going one at each other. But Lord Deathman basically says, like, but I'm immortal, and I've probably been at this longer than you, and I retain everything that I've ever learned. And I just need to say this panel specifically. He retains everything from the dim mock technique to the name of every single Pokemon. And their evolutions. So, yeah. We see him stab a knife through Calvin's chest, saying that he's a murder Buddha, and nobody's there to rub his belly. And then Casey tells Anya she's just roaming about the compound, that someone is behind her. Turns out it's Dr. Dark, and Dark's like, hey, Anya, good to see you again. I am the one who bought you from your mother, essentially, to use you for my own special stuff. How's it going? And we see him activate a special hatch thing that is flooding the cave where Calvin and Lord Deadman are, and it's full of sharks. Just saying that that's happening. So we get two separate scenes. One is Lord Deathman and Calvin fighting, and Deathman basically says, like, hey, you and we both were unable to die, so that's pretty cool. Why don't we work together to get out of this cave? And Calvin throws a shark at him and says, nah, not gonna happen. And then they just continue fighting. Meanwhile, Anya and Damien Dark are also fighting as well. Anya points out, like, bro, I betrayed you, and then you were killed by Ra's al Ghul and put into this weird state that you're currently in, where you're in, like, a test tube. And now you're working for Ra's al Ghul? Dude, you're pathetic. And he's like, shut up. So they continue fighting for a while. Eventually, Anya is pinned down to the ground. She's about to be killed. And she holds up a detonator switch and says, hey, I found a room back there filled with a bunch of, like, infants in green globes. I'm betting that's Ra's al Ghul's backup body plan. And I'm gonna blow it all to hell unless you and I come to an agreement here. And she's like, all right, fair enough. What's the agreement? And then we just leave. And then, like, that scene's just done. And we skip ahead in time to Gotham City, where we're reenacting the same thing that we did at the beginning of the last issue, where Calvin is in a coffin, hung by a crane, it's on fire, and he has to escape. And he manages to do so, and we see specifically he has color back in his skin. So we get a call about someone who's trying to escape from Intergang, and Casey's like, oh, that sounds like a job for our team, because apparently our whole thing is that whenever somebody wants to get out of a bad situation, we're going to be there. We have an escape artist, get it? So Calvin says, like, yes, I've done it. I am no longer immortal. Turns out the deal that they made with Damien Dark is that they are allowed to keep Lord Deathman as long as they turn Calvin back mortal. So he is. And they say, like, yep, nope, I got a team of people who will work with me no matter what, and everything's cool and great. And then we see over with Damien Dark, they're putting Lord Deathman bound and gagged into a cement tomb where he will be unable to escape from again. And then Ra's al Ghul's over the comm saying, like, oh, are you going to be able to get the formula I need out of his veins? And Damien Dark takes off his helmet and says, like, oh, yes, my dear Demon's Head, I have all the time in the world. And this is the end, question mark, which, like, yes, it is. This is the end. So, final issue-wise, I think it should have ended 2 issues ago. I think we should have ended with the idea of, you know, James Tynion gets off the book, and we just call it there. Why we had to have these last 2 issues, honestly, seems like a proving ground for Tim Seeley. Seems like they were like, all right, look, we'll give you 2 more issues, show us what you got, and then we'll give you Grayson in like 6 months. But yeah, no, it's not a bad 2-issue arc. I honestly enjoy Lord Deathman as like a funny villain, but I don't know, to make this the final thing, I think that it was kind of, and I have no evidence to this, but it feels like it was a editorial thing of, well, we can't leave him dead. Like, let's bring him back to life. That was kind of a story arc, is like, you know, he doesn't want to be dead. And I guess, but sometimes characters can just exist with bad things happening to them, you know? But yeah, overall, it's a fine enough final issue. Just not where I would have ended it. I would say this is probably... I'll give it a 7. And that's a lot of the carrying is how much I enjoyed this series just in general, but it is at most a 7. Superman number 29, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Ed Benes. So last issue, there was something about like alien tech, and Superman was trying to interrogate this guy to figure out where it came from. And then Starfire showed up, about to burn the place down, and said, "Stand back, Superman, the fate of the world depends on it." So we open up with Superman, and he's just staring down Starfire like, all right, what's up? What are we doing here? And this, immediately, page 2, we have like a horizontal fold-out thing, like a pin-up sort of thing. I hate this so much in books. It makes it impossible to read. So Starfire basically says like, hey, look, you have no idea what's going on. Just leave this up to me. I'm going to deal with this, and I'm going to deal with it the same way I deal with all my enemies. And Superman's like, that sounds like killing. I'm kind of against that. So no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to let you kill. And Starfire's like, don't really care. And by the way, they're already dead, so whatever. And Starfire is about to blast Superman, and he decides to use his cold breath on her to immobilize her. And then he's just like, all right, well, I've got long enough you being frozen that I can figure out what's going on here. And we see him talking about when he held the weapon, how it felt like it was almost alive. And he's just like, all right, so something's happened there, but he doesn't have any meta powers. So like, why is it so important that Starfire kill this guy? And then all of a sudden he shoots up, he's awake, and he starts like shape-shifting. And it's a Daemonite. We're back to Daemonites. I mean, it was already teased, I think 2 issues ago when we had Hellspawn show back up. But the Daemonite's like, haha, Superman, we're here and we're going to finally take over. You had your chance, but you threw it away. And so here we are again. And then Starfire just incinerates him, just straight up like he's gone. And she's just like, yeah, no, he was an alien. He was an evil alien. And clearly that's perfectly fine to kill evil aliens. So Superman says, you know, there's always another way. We don't have to kill, blah, blah, blah. And she's just like, dude, no, like they are hostile, taking over the world. We have to go ahead and do that. But the thing is, though, what's special about this time around is that those people that they took the bodies of, they were volunteers. Like, people are trying to cause the end of the world here. That's no bueno. And he's just like, no, absolutely. So the police come in, they're trying to shoot at Starfire, and Superman just gets in the way, blocks the bullets as they keep talking, and then he turns to the police officers and is like, hey, I'm having a conversation. You know what? We'll leave. Bye. So they go out through the roof. We cut over to Cat Grant, who is stopped on the street by Morgan Edge, and he's like, hey, so you thought about my offer about buying your stupidly named website? And she's like, I talked to Clark. We're not going to sell. We're going to maintain some dignity. And he's just like, that's a really bad move. And then he drives away. So I'm sure that'll come back. So we go over to Starfire is inside of some cells somewhere where like all of these guys are Daemonites. I guess it's the people who were arrested like also in that raid. And she's like, I am not going to let my new home planet be taken over again. So she goes in and she starts trying to fry. And then Superman's like, look, I can stop this without killing. And he uses his super breath again to just freeze everybody. And Starfire's like, no wonder Kryptonians died out. You guys are stubborn as hell. And he's just like, all right, well, that's racist, but whatever. So they take the guns and the frozen Daemonites over to Star Labs in order to do some investigation to see like what is going on here. And Starfire does start to, like, warm up a little bit to Superman's thing, just being like, okay, look, it looks like we have this under control. I'm not opposed to doing things your way, but, like, it's a hell of a lot more complicated than my way. But either way, the Superman takes a look at the weapon and just being like, oh, I can pick up a signal on it. You can come with if you promise not to kill anybody. She's like, all right, I guess so. So they fly over to some fairground or something like that, and Superman gives, like, the lowdown. He's like, now I know all about you, Starfire, about your sister and how she sold you into slavery, and then she was also, like, an evil person. Just letting you know that I know that. And we see that all of, like, there's a crate that has all of its weapons missing, but it's the exact, like, the holes in it for the weapons is the exact same number that they recovered. So they're like, cool, awesome. We got all the weapons. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And then all of a sudden there's a little kid just running around, and he's like, help, you got to help me, Superman. I'm scared and alone. And he's just like, don't worry, Timmy. His name is literally Timothy. Don't worry, little Timmy. I will come and save you. And Starfire's like, bro, you're in a abandoned warehouse. There's this little kid without a scratch on him, and you're just blindly believing that that little kid is actually a little kid. And as they start arguing, little Timmy transforms, and he's like, yeah, no, totally. I was totally a human. Or I was totally a Damonite the whole time, posing as a human. Ha ha ha. So at that point, Superman's like, all right, well, now I just look like an idiot, so I'm going to beat you up for it. But then he just, like, self-destructs. He just turns into goo, and he just fades away. And it's like, all right, I gotta admit, I have no idea what's happening anymore, but there's something coming this way. That's the only thing I know, because that's what the guy was saying. Then we cut over to Lois Lane's story. She's with her boyfriend. The boyfriend's like, hey, man, Superman, like, was going to sell you up the river to Parasite, and that's not cool. And Lois is like, don't worry about it. But she uses her special speak with her superpowers, and she says, like, forget the whole thing. And then John just does. He just forgets the whole thing. So we go out into space, and there's a spaceship. It's Starfire's sister, Commander. She's there, and she's doing something evil, Blackfire, and she's just like, oh, yeah, these demonites, it doesn't matter, like, but something went wrong with our plan down on Earth, so I have, in order to save my people, I'm having to make some, my own sacrifices. And then she kneels before someone saying, my lord, we have a problem, and wouldn't you know it, it's Hellspawn, and it basically saying, like, it's Superman and my sister, and they've teamed up, and Hellspawn's like, whatever, it's not going to matter. But if they're not afraid of the Damonites, but they are afraid of something else that's coming, what the hell is scarier than me? I'm Hellspawn. And that's the end of the issue. But the answer is literally everything. Absolutely, literally everything is scarier than you, Hellspawn. So, I've already said it. Back when Hellspawn was teased last time, is that it's stupid, and I hate that, and why in the hell are we still doing that? But, hey, we're here. We even got a little editor's box in this saying, like, check out Superman Annual #1 or whatever. Like, the point where Hellspawn killed all the Damonites, as if, like, oh, yeah, see, we're picking up on those threats. And I'm like, no, don't. I don't want those threads. Start new threads. Get Scott Lobdell off this book. No, so I'm just not happy with the direction of the story overall. And on top of that, it seems a little bit just like meandering. And I think we only have like 2 more issues before Scott Lobdell is actually off the book. So, like, what are we even going to be doing? You know? It just, I don't know. Overall, I say this is going to be 5.5. It's technically not a bad book, like it's not under a 5, but I find so little to get enjoyment out of this and so little that I care about that I can barely give it above that. So yeah. Larfleeze #9, written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, art by Scott Kolins. Last issue, we had the House of Tuathan. We're all meeting up on, hey, how do we deal with Larfleeze? And then the Sister of Love, or whatever you want to call her, Ardora, showed up and said, hey, I brought Larfleeze. So everyone immediately starts freaking out. They're like, why would you? We will deal with you later. Right now, Larfleeze. So the Lord of the Hunt jumps in. He starts trying to bat at Larfleeze. No go. It's just like, he's put up a shield, and he's just like, yeah, no, your whole family sucks. You keep on trying to attack me. You keep on making my life worse. I'm going to exact my vengeance on all of you now. So the big brother, who we got introduced last issue, the Lord of all things, also known as Zum, he steps up and he's like, I am literally the Lord of all things. I know all, I have all, I am all, and I will destroy you right now. And Larfleeze is like, I'm sorry, did you say all the things? And so Wanderer steps in and be like, no, he didn't say that. He has nothing to his name. He is poor and destitute. But of course, Larfleeze is already locked in. And he's like, I want all the things. Mine, mine, mine. Gimme, gimme, gimme. So he starts attacking Zum. Zum's like, don't lay your hands on me, you gross monkey thing. So the Lord of the Hunt grabs hold of him. Zum blasts Larfleeze out of Lord's hand. And Lord of the Hunt's like, ow, dude, what's going on, man? They start bickering with each other. Wanderer steps in being like, guys, seriously, focus. It's Larfleeze. We got to deal with him. And she gets blasted back by Zum, who's just like, all right, no more messing around. Here's my special dagger that will destroy everything or whatever. It will absorb your very essence. Time to die. And we cut away to the rest of the family watching this. And then as we cut back, Larfleeze has chained up Zum in his Orange Lantern constructs. And he's like, yep, that's me. I got you now. And Zum points out that because of Orange Lantern energy, he's unable to focus the willpower to use his abilities to get out of this. So Larfleeze is seemingly winning, but Wanderer steps up being like, I've seen the future. I know how this goes. I have to be the one that kills Larfleeze. So she rushes in, she electrocutes Larfleeze, and Larfleeze is like, oh, is that all you've got? And then immediately, like, the entire Citadel just explodes. And we just see Larfleeze standing there saying, I have taken out your house. It has fallen. I have left your place in ruins. I am now Larfleeze, the Orange God, and I will be absorbing all the things. So he picks up Zum and flies away. And we see, standing in the ruins, everyone else is still there, and they're just like, okay, that was crazy, but let's focus on one thing right now. Ardora, what in the actual hell? And she's like, we're always backstabbing each other. And she's like, that could have killed us, though. She's like, all right, fair enough. Maybe that was a bit too much. But we cut over to Wanderer, and she is super upset about all this. And Stargrave steps up like, hey, he forgot to take me. By the way, why don't we just leave this universe? Clearly you can jump universes. Let's just bail on this one and go to one without Larfleeze. And she says, there's an old ancient rite in my family that anyone who bests me in one-on-one combat, as Larfleeze just did, I am sworn to them forever, and I will be their bride. So we cannot escape them anymore. And the whole House of Tuathan hears this, and they're like, hey, sis, when Dad told you that was a house rule, he was drunk and stupid. So nobody here is expecting you to follow that. And she's like, nope, he made me swear, and therefore I will honor his thing. And he's like, okay, but Dad sucked. And it's like, all right, but whatever, I'm doing it anyway. So she grabs Stargraves and then flies off and is going to find Larfleeze for the wedding. Over on a nearby asteroid, we see that Zum is all chained up. He's unable to do anything. And Larfleeze is like, show me where all the things are. And he's like, I am all the things. It's in my heart and my soul and my body and my head. And he's like, all right, we'll start with your head. And he makes a giant drill construct and just drills into Zum's head. And we see the whole house is reacting. They can feel the pain and death that Zum is going through. And they're freaking out about it. Wanderer starts crashing down onto a planet. We don't see where she lands. Larfleeze, he looks over and he's just like, that doesn't look like all the things. That just looks like normal brain goo. I've been tricked. Come on, Stargrave, let's go get our revenge. And he looks around and he's like, oh crap, right, I forgot Stargrave. Why does this keep happening? So he flies off again. We go to the remaining members of the House of Tuathan, and they're like, oh my god, our brother is dead. We felt him cry out. He's gone forever. And then a little, space roach comes up, and he's like, hey, everyone, it's me, your brother. I moved my spirit into this body, and all I need to do is be able to get to, my replacement body, so somebody help me. And then Ardora just smashes him, because he's a little space roach, and she's like, ew, gross, bugs. So at that point, everyone's like, all right, whatever. He'll reconstitute himself. But, can we all agree that Larfleeze is problem number one here and not backstab each other anymore? And everyone's like, yeah, all right, that's fair. Well, we'll all get together. We'll see if we can use our sister having a wedding with Larfleeze to our advantage and, get the drop on him. And then we cut over to, if you remember the planet that Larfleeze ruled for like a hot minute, I think last issue, honestly, they called a Green Lantern to come and help and save them from Larfleeze. Well, a bunch of time has passed and no one showed up. And they're like, oh, did we do something wrong? What's going on, man? Where's our Green Lantern? And then all of a sudden a green light comes out of the sky. And they're like, oh, he's here. Wait a minute. That's not the same one who protected us. And it's like, oh, well, what's the difference between any of the Green Lanterns? I'm sure this one will be fine. And then all of a sudden they realize how wrong they are, because this is Nort. And for anyone who doesn't know Nort, he's Nort. G-N-O-R-T. Just Google him. He's not the best lantern. So he's here and he's like, Nort, the lantern will fix it. So, yeah, Larfleeze versus Nort, because why not? I didn't hate this issue. I give it a lot of exasperated sighs, but it's really just because of the ridiculousness of it. That being said, this issue isn't particularly as humorous as like previous issues have been. I will say I enjoyed the back and forth of like, we don't want you to marry Larfleeze. Literally nobody's holding you to that. Just like, don't do it. And she's like, no, I must. It is the rule of law. And she just flies away. I like that. That's funny to me. But yeah, everything else just kind of felt like, you know, we started with Larfleeze against the House of Tuatan, and they were scared of him, and we're ending with that as well. So all we really happened was we lost one of the brothers and we got a Nort, which I don't know if that's a net gain. Regardless, I think this is probably like a 6.5. I don't dislike it, but there have been better issues of this series, even if I don't really like the series that much overall. Red Lanterns number 29, written by Charles Soule, art by Alessandro Vitti. So, depending on who you ask, either Supergirl was the last issue of this Red Daughter of Krypton thing, or Green Lanterns / Red Lanterns 28 was. Technically it's Red Lanterns. So this issue picks up, we have Skallix and Zilius Zox. Skallix is like, hey, when we took out that warlord, I got this missile array system, and each of the missiles has like neutron stars on the tip, and it is capable of such intense destructive stuff, and I've wanted to try it for so long, and I finally have a reason. And Zilius is like, okay, but don't you think this is overkill? And she's like, nonsense, she asked for it. And you press the button, and we see all the missiles are aimed at Supergirl, and she just starts blasting through them with her ring until finally one of them hits, and they're just like, ooh, all right, maybe she's dead now. But then she blasts out of the explosion, and she's super pissed off. And Skallix is like, that was beautiful. But then she comes down and starts smashing the missile array system, and he's like, no, that was my favorite thing. Why? So they go to the bar, which they just call the bar because they can't agree on a name. And Supergirl's like, hey, sorry I blew up your favorite thing. And he's just like, whatever, we'll go get another thing. By the way, I would gladly trade like 100 of those things to have someone as strong as you in the Red Lantern Corps. You are going to do great. And so they pour a drink for Kara, and then Guy Gardner shows up being like, yo, she ain't 21, man. She's a kid. And it's like, okay, but she's a Red Lantern. And I feel like that trumps being a kid. Plus, when did we care about how old she was? So at that point, Guy takes the drink, and Supergirl's just like, you are not my father. You aren't even Superman. Don't tell me what I can or can't do. Give me back my drink. And then as she goes to grab for it, it shatters in Guy's hand. And she's just like, oh, geez, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. And he's like, it's fine. It's cool. Let's go, everybody. We're going on patrol. And so they all fly out to Earth, and Supergirl's like, I don't want to go back to Earth. I just left Earth. And he's like, well, this is like our sector. We have to do our thing. Hey, there's a report of something weird on the dark side of the moon. Why don't you go scan that entire area for a while? And we'll get back to you. And she's like, all right, fine. So she flies off, and Guy's like, hey, all right, look, guys. We can't have Supergirl in the Red Lantern Corps. And they're like, what? Why? She's totally awesome. We need to keep her around. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, she's too much for us to handle right now. We are barely able to keep ourselves together here. Having someone that ridiculously powerful will end up destroying us. So I need you guys to keep her distracted, like find fake things for you guys to quote unquote save. I'm gonna go get Superman. So we see that there's some sort of tsunami that's affected some country. Superman's going in, he's saving a bunch of people, and there's a giant wave approaching, and he's got his hands full with a bunch of people he's saving. He's unable to do much about it. And so Guy Gardner zooms in, grabs a bunch more of the people and says like, oh, hey, thought you could use a hand. And he's like, oh, hey, you're Guy Gardner. I recognize you from Just League International, but weren't you green? And he's like, yeah, I'm red now. It's like, okay, well, Hal said that the Reds are, anyway, so what are you doing here? He's like, oh, well, this is my beat. This is my thing. He's like, oh, cool, great. Yeah, I'm sure Hal's got a good reason for putting you in charge. He's like, that's not really up to Hal anymore, Superman. Anyway, look, here's the thing. Don't worry about that. I just need to talk to you about something. And then Supergirl comes flying and just being like, oh, yeah, you think I'm an idiot? Clearly this was all trying just to talk to Cal. What the hell is wrong with you? And he's just immediately, Superman turns to Guy and is just like, what did you do to my cousin? He's like, well, I didn't do anything. She's got some unresolved issues. She's super pissed off. And the red ring, like, got to her. So, yeah, that's going on. So Superman and Kara start arguing. And at one point, Superman says, like, take off the ring. And Scalix comes up and be like, oh, she can't. If she takes it off, it'll literally kill her. She's stuck being a Red Lantern forever. But she's cool. We're cool with that. And Kara's just like, I'm sorry, I didn't know about that bit. So she freaks out. She's super pissed off about that. She releases a huge amount of energy. Flies over to a nearby ship that's been beached. And Superman's like, he flies over. He's like, look, Kara, I know this is dangerous, but like, we can go down and talk to Shea Veritas. Maybe she can do something. And then she just backhands Superman with this giant shipping container. And Zillius is like, that's pretty cool though, right? So another giant wave's coming up. It's about to hit the shore. Supergirl just blasts it with her napalm, like blood breath, and it just dissolves into steam. And finally she gets it all out of her system. She turns to the guy and she's like, why didn't you tell me this was forever? And he's like, I'm sorry, that's not really something that's easy to bring up. I was waiting for you to calm down to some certain extent, and maybe Superman, like, could help you get there. And she's just like, you don't understand me and my dynamics at all. I'm not cool with Earth or Superman right now. None of this is good. And at that point, Superman comes in. He's just like, hey, look, I get it. We've had our problems, but like, we're just trying to help. And he's just like, no, who says I need help? Maybe this is the way I want to do things. Like, the Reds don't have to hide anything. They're just the way they are. So yeah, whatever. I mean, maybe I want to be a Red. And Superman's like, you know what? Fine. Go ahead. Whatever. You've had so many like teenage angst problems since you've shown up, and I'm done with it. All right, if you think you want to be an adult, you want to go off, do Red Lantern stuff, so be it. But you got to look at the fact that you are so pissed off at everything that you have literally become a personification of anger. Deal with that. So he turns to Guy and he's just like, regardless, if you're in charge of her, you better damn well take care of her, or I swear to God I will be coming for you. So Superman goes off. He goes away, and before he leaves, he's just like, and by the way, this is like, she is my family. And then Zillius chimes up being like, hey, Superman, she's our family now too. Check yourself. And Superman just like glares down at him, turns to Guy and be like, he's a ballsy little thing, isn't he? And Guy's like, yeah, that's kind of his whole thing. So he says bye to Kara, flies off, and they all make their way back to Gizmolt. And Kara's like, oh, hey, you guys got giant statues. When do I get a statue? And he's like, oh, well, you got to beat Space Hitler first. And she's like, cool, let's go do it. And he's like, I like you. You're a good one. But as they look down on the planet, they see there's a big glowing crater. And they're like, oh, a meteorite must have landed. I'll go check it out. And the guy's like, Kara, hold on. It's usually not something so simple. And as she gets to the crater, she sees inside of it is Bleeze. And they're like, Bleeze, yo, what happened? Why are you beat up? Where's Rancor? And the only thing she can say is Atrocitus. So, Guy's freaking out, but yeah, that's the issue. I like it. Here's the thing. I know that Supergirl joining the Red Lanterns is looked upon after the fact as like, I don't want to say desperate, but it's not well revered. You know, it's just kind of the period that we just don't talk about. But I think that in both Supergirl and this book, they've done a fantastic job of explaining why this is happening. You know, it doesn't feel like it just came out of nowhere. It doesn't feel like it just Red Lanterns and Supergirl both need a ratings boost, so we did a crossover for a while. It feels natural, and I think that this issue does a great job of her finally coming back to Superman, because she hasn't talked to him in like 3-4 arcs, and just saying like, I need this right now, and I'm just going to do this. This is my crazy college years. So, yeah, overall, I'm going to give this issue 7.5. I actually really enjoyed it the whole way through, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Atrocitus and Supergirl manage to square off, because that's going to be fun. Aquaman number 29, written by Jeff Parker, art by Paul Pelletier. So, last issue, some archaeology dude stole Aquaman's trident and is using it as a key on, like, the other side of the world. And apparently it's some gateway or something like that. But we pick up with Aquaman tearing his house apart, not, you know, metaphorically. And he's just like, I can't believe I lost the trident. Dear God. And now the council wants to meet for like a surprise meeting, and I'm not going to have my trident. Ah, this sucks. So at that point, that police officer that they know, Erica, steps up, knocks on the door, and just being like, hey, we did some looking around on like security cameras around the area, and we did find a car registered to this guy. He left for the airport, and his name is Dr. Daniel Evans. So he's got a site out in the Azores, wherever that is. So we see at the dig site, he has assembled tons of people, camera crews, stuff like that. And he's like, all right, so here's the deal, everybody. I had some weird theories that Atlantis is responsible not just for their own civilization, but for several other civilizations around the world. Now that we know Atlantis is real, I posited that there's some sort of temporal bend in Atlantis that allows them to travel through time as well. It's a whole thing. Regardless, he thinks Atlantis is a key to opening up this specific area. He takes the trident. He's like, yeah, I borrowed it. Don't worry about it. And he sets it down in there. And then it starts lighting stuff up, and everyone's like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And he reasons out that this is going to be a portal to Atlantis, because some old scribe stuff he saw, and they translated out, said gate to Atlantis. And he, as he's recording this stuff, he's like pushing a camera through, and he's like, if we pull it out and we see recordings show that it's Atlantis, then we'll send in like a submarine and all this other stuff. But before you can do anything, there's some voices from the other side saying like, hey, we're free, let's go. And then a whole bunch of monsters just come flying out of the hole and start attacking everybody. And one of them, I don't know if she has a name, she shows up and she's like, hey, all right, here's the deal. We're monsters. We were working on the other side of this gate to make you think it said gate to Atlantis, when in reality, it doesn't say gate to Atlantis. It says the hell of Atlantis. Well, this is basically a supermax prison for demons back in the day. And you just let us out, stupid idiot. So we cut down to Atlantis. Mara is going in the place of Arthur for this council meeting because the rules say that she can. So she heads in, and one of the scientists is like, hey, yeah, this was an emergency. All of the oceans just turned to algae for like 2 minutes and then disappeared, and we don't know what caused it, but if you were reading Swamp Thing, it was that. It was Swamp Thing. He did it. And the book is basically just saying, like, tune in for a few weeks from now when Swamp Thing's going to show up. So that's just happening. Meanwhile, up on the surface, we see Dr. Evans is just running for his life. All of his, like, people that he worked with, all the people that were there being eaten and just murdered and destroyed. And all the monsters are purposely avoiding Dr. Evans because they're like, hey, he freed us. He's cool. He's chill. We're going to let him live and watch as we rule this world. And then Aquaman comes in and he starts beating the crap out of everybody. He goes to Dr. Evans, and Evans is like, hey, I borrowed your trident. Sorry, I didn't think it would be this bad of stuff. And it's like, dude, everything Atlantis has done in terms of surface world stuff has been bad. Like, why did you think this was going to be any different? He's just like, I don't know. So he goes around, he keeps on beating everything. The one main one says like, hey, we got to hold them off until all of the Giant-born, which is what they call themselves, are free. And her name is actually Selenia. Celiana? I don't know, something like that. And so she's like, okay, I know how to deal with this. And so she goes down into the portal and she gets out someone specifically. And she's like, hey, time to come back out, time to come home. And we see Aquaman Everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? I'm not familiar with this one. What's up? But he's wearing the crest of Atlantis on his belt. And only a king is going to be that pompous. It's like wearing an American flag belt buckle. So he's just like, yeah, no, totally. We have no concept of time for how long we've been in there, but this guy's clearly the king of Atlantis. So as they are about to like stab Aquaman, he manages to break free of their grip. But as he looks around back at the portal, he sees Celiana being like, hey, king of Atlantis, have I got a surprise for you? Here is the giant, like all the giant-born nightmares, that's a thing, but here's something so much worse. And this giant dude, super muscle-bound, comes out, and he just starts crashing down on Aquaman. And everyone's like, yeah, do it, kill him. And we see that he like is able to speak, and he's like, it's been so long, I came to help. And he keeps on beating up Aquaman. Aquaman looks around, he sees one of them looks vaguely fish-like, and he's like, maybe I can command that one. And he does. He ends up having the fish dude like eating this giant muscle-bound guy. And the muscle-bound guy just tears it in half. He's just like, "Rug, how dare you." So Aquaman punches him in the face. He lands a few good hits, but it's not enough to keep this guy down. And as Aquaman's about to throw this muscle-bound dude back into the portal, that's where he really freaks out. He's like, I am never going back in there again. So he grabs Aquaman, throws him down, gets him in a headlock, and Celiana reveals he's just like, hey, you know who this guy is? Here's the thing. When all of our giant-born whatever demons were coming out and attacking the world, Atlantis needed help taking them down. So a son of Olympus came and tried to help. And he did. He fought them back. But in your haste, in Atlantis' haste to seal back up the portal, you sealed this dude on the other side. Aquaman, may I introduce you to the mighty Hercules? So, yeah, Hercules is now an Aquaman villain because Atlanteans sealed him on the other side of a demon portal for millennia. That wasn't chill. Very uncool of you, Atlantis. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm down with this issue. It definitely, this arc kind of started out of nowhere. I appreciate that they have been seeding it over the past 2 issues of, you got the guy going around town, seeing where Aquaman is, trying to figure out what's going on. And then all of a sudden last issue, he's just like, I stole his trident while he was at a high school reunion. I'm not opposed to the seeding. I think that's fine. I'm not even opposed to this arc, but it definitely feels like it's like, and now we're doing this. And now this is just happening. And especially add on to the fact that we had that whole thing of Mara going down to find out that Swamp Thing's going to be a thing, like in a few more issues later. It definitely feels like we're just moving at a breakneck pace, just seeing what works here. I'm not entirely sure like what Jeff Parker's end goal here is, like what the thing we're building up to at this moment. Ostensibly, it's probably that research center down at the bottom of the ocean, but like they aren't around right now, so I don't know what's going on. All in all, I'm going to say this one is probably just flat 7. It's good, I enjoy it, but it's definitely mostly setup, so we'll see how we pay that off sooner rather than later. The Flash 29, written by Brian Buccellato, art by Agustin Padilla. So, last issue, God, there was a lot. All right, so, well, you know what, there's a recap page literally on the first 2 pages of this. So, we open up with Flash and Deadman coming across Director Singh with a bloody pickaxe in hand, and literally everybody on the night shift at the police department is dead. And he's just like, I found them. They were already dead. And Flash is like, I believe you, man, but like, why did you pick up the pickaxe? And he's like, it was for defense. I didn't know if he was still here. So Flash is like, all right, cool, whatever. So Deadman's like, I can possess him, see if he's telling the truth. And Flash is like, no, you can't do that. It's an invasion of privacy. And Singh's like, what? What are you talking about? And he's like, sorry, right, you can't see Deadman. Anyway, so Flash goes over and he's like, I'm going to watch all the security footage just to make sure. And I'm going to do it real quick. And Deadman's like, you can't, like, what are you going to do? Watch it and fast forward? And he's like, yeah. And so we watch and fast forward and we see that there was a janitor who was possessed by the ghost. And I guess this is a good time as any. So last issue, we had this miner who found gemstones. He was killed, even though he didn't do anything like particularly wrong, by this other guy who was jealous. And then the other guy took it and founded the Gem Cities, But then this ghost was so pissed off about it that he is seeking revenge. And he's looking for somebody possessed who is part of his bloodline because that's the only way that he's able to make it permanent. And it seems like Captain Fry may be one of those people that's part of his bloodline. So, all that going on, we then have him run to Captain Fry's house, and he's just like, cool, awesome, got to deal with this. But when he gets there, Fry's not there. It's only Forrest James, or James Forrest. And he's like knocked out, and Flash brings him to, and he's just like, dude, what happened? Where's Captain Fry? And he's just like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And Forrest starts to remember. He's just like, oh, that thing, it killed everyone on the night shift. It jumped into me and brought me here, but Captain Fry wasn't home. And then Deadman phases through the wall. He's like, Flash, seriously, I can't keep up with you, man. You got to slow down a little bit. And he says, yeah, no, he was looking for Captain Fry. Captain Fry wasn't there. It went to a postal worker, and that's all it was. So at that point, Forrest remembers that Captain Fry challenged the ghost to meet him at the spot where they last met. And Flash is like, do you know where that is? And he's like, nope, but I'm sure that they have some sort of history, so look into that. So Flash runs off. He turns back into Barry and starts talking to Patty at the crime scene, which is the Central City Police Department. And he's saying like, hey, I think that Captain Fry is part of the bloodline, and I think that he's looking for that so he can possess it. And Patty's like, okay, but if that's the case, you need to know that, like, I'm reasonably sure that Daryl, Captain Fry, is your biological father. And Barry's like, I'm sorry, what? I can't deal with that right now. That's too much. I don't have time. And he runs off again. So Barry starts tearing through the captain's office looking for anything, and he finds paternity results for himself. He sees the genetic things, and he's like, oh my God, it can't be. So we see Captain Fry chilling out in the middle of like a park. The ghost shows up, and he's like, I knew you'd come. And he's just like, oh yeah, luring me back. You think you can finish the job this time? And he's like, oh, I am burying you this time. So the ghost runs towards Captain Fry. Captain Fry gets possessed, and turns out he was wearing like a suicide vest. It's covered in grenades. He pulls all the pins, and just as they're about to explode, Barry comes in, steals them, puts them all down at the bottom of the lake, and he's caught in the explosion. And the ghost yells out like, wait a minute, hold on, you're not part of my bloodline. You lied to me. You're not a Sutter, but that guy is. And he points over to Flash, and we see, as the ghost is approaching, Deadman brings in the House of Mystery, just lands it right in the park. And he's like, hey, we're both ghosts, which means that I know all your vulnerabilities, and your vulnerability to supernatural items like this. And the ghost is like, okay, but like, I'm just not going to engage with you. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, you've clearly got a trap laid out for ghosts inside that magic house. I'm just not going to come anywhere near it. And he's like, but you got it. Like, come on. And he's like, no, I'm just going to go after Flash. So then Flash gets in the way, and he's like, all right, screw this. You want me, take me. And so the ghost goes inside of Flash, and Flash starts like vibrating super quick to the point where he's not allowing the ghost to take control. And he says, all right, Deadman, where was the trap? And he's like, oh, second door on the right. So Flash runs in, drops Sutter off in the trap, and then comes back. And he explains exactly how everything happened, which is that something about his special meta whatevers makes it so that he is like able to vibrate as a reflex to stop from possession. And so then the House of Mystery takes back off. Flash looks over at the captain and says like, okay, yeah, he's done. He's gone for. Don't have to worry about that. And we cut to sometime later where the captain's talking to Barry directly. And Barry reveals how it all happened is that Captain Fry thought that the ghost thing would come back eventually. And so he faked Barry's paternal records to say that he was not a descendant of Sutter in order to make it so that he was protected, because he did love Nora. He did love Barry's mom before she ended up getting married. And that's the whole reason that he kind of took Barry in, was because it was like having a piece of Nora back in his life. So he admits, like, yeah, no, I'm not your biological father, but I love you as if I was, and, like, I hope that's enough. And they hug, they make up. Captain Fry leaves, and Barry's like, hey, look, I'm also talking to Patty. He's like, hey, look, I'm also sorry that I got so obsessive over my mom's killer. Like, it was a whole thing. And she's like, yeah, well, maybe that's a sign that you should, like, let it go. You know, she just died. That's all you need to know. And he's like, yeah, you're right. I'll let it go. And then we see Captain Fry going to Barry's dad in jail saying, like, hey, he still thinks that, like, Nora's killer is someone else and that he can find her. He'll never stop trying, but you can never tell him the truth of who really killed Nora, implying that they both know, and it's something that must be kept secret for Barry's safety. And with that, that's the end of Brian Buccellato's run. I forget who picks it up next, but I think it's Venditti. I think this is the start of Venditti's run. But yeah, no, that was, I mean, it was kind of just a simple little wrap-up thing. All the pieces that we thought were going to come in place. They did pull the little trickster of, like, you know, we're very much leaning on the fact that, oh, is Captain Fry the biological father? But the fact that it was moving so quick kind of clued me in very early on of, no, of course not. This is a big, like, change in the character's history of, like, who he is, if that's the case. So makes sense that they did a little rug pull there. But it did surprise me as to how they managed to pull it off and the reasons why. So overall, I think it was an enjoyable little mini arc there. Deadman was always fun to deal with. I'm going to give this one, I'll give it a 7.5. I think the arc as a whole is probably like a 7, but this one's a 7.5. All-Star Western 29, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Cliff Richards. So last issue, Jonah and his girlfriend Gina traveled back through time to where they were supposed to be, or where he was supposed to be. Gina just teamed along. And then they were surrounded by a bunch of Native Americans who are threatening to kill him because he says he's Jonah Hex, but he doesn't look like it anymore because his face got healed. So Jonah just turns to Gina and says, like, all right, try not to get shot. And she's like, what? And he just starts unloading on all of these natives, just killing every last one of them. And their horses start running off, but Gina's like, hey, Jonah, that was impressive and all, but, like, I got shot. And we see, you know, she got shot in the leg. It's in her thigh. And he's like, ah, damn. All right. He comes over. He takes a look at it. She starts just yelping in pain. This is the most pain she's ever had in her life. And he's like, all right, hold on a minute. He goes over, gets a knife from one of the Indians, and it's like, I'm going to get out the bullet now. We don't have whiskey or a fire, so this is going to hurt more than you could possibly imagine. She's like, I am terrified, Jonah, and you're not doing much better to solve me of that. And he's like, well, no use of getting over it now. So we cut to her being, you know, curled up next to a fire. Apparently they had rattlesnake for dinner. And she's like, I can't believe I got shot and ate rattlesnake all in one night. And he's like, I can't believe it either. You're adjusting better than I would have thought. But either way, we'll head into town. We'll find you a doctor. We'll make sure that leg's doing all right. And she's like, I can't even possibly sleep tonight. Like, I'm in way too much pain than that. And he's like, well, maybe we could do something to help you relax. Wiggle in the eyebrows. And she's like, not really a mood setter there, Jonah. Not really in the mood, but you know what? How about this? Tell me a story. I want to hear one of your stories of you being like a cowboy or whatnot. And he's like, that's not what I am. And also, I'm not a storyteller. And she's like, come on, please do it for me. I got shot. And he's like, look, I have a story to tell you, but I'm not saying it's going to be a good one. So he opens up talking about a guy who's talking about his homestead. And he's standing next to it. It's burned down, completely destroyed. And he's like, I lived here with my wife, my children, my mother. We lived out here on the land. We had good old Christian values. And then one day we hear the dog barking outside. And so he grabs his gun, he steps outside, and he sees that the entire place has started going up in flames, and it's a bunch of natives who have started the fire. And they come in, they start attacking the guy. He starts unloading gunshot after gunshot on him, but they manage to wrestle the gun away from him. He wrestles away one of their hatchets from them and starts just swinging, trying to defend his family. And it's no use. There are too many of them. He runs back inside. He tries to grab his family, and he says, hey, you got to get out. You got to run. Like, they're here. They're going to kill us. You got to sneak out and get away. I'm going to hold them off. And he starts swinging. He starts attacking as best he can, but eventually the natives hold him down and force him to watch as the house burns down with his family inside of it. And he says, like, yeah, I was broken for a while there, but then eventually I got angry and I broke out of the bonds that they kept me in because they kept me prisoner. And now I'm going around and I am killing as many of those savages as I can possibly find because they deserve it. And we see he's telling this whole story to Jonah at pretty early on in his bounty hunting career, judging by his outfit. And he's like, all right, I don't care. Like, that's a sad story and whatnot, but you are a wanted man. You are killing Native Americans on their own land, and that's a crime, and therefore I have to bring you in. And the poster says bring you in alive, so that's the way I'm going to do it. And he's like, I'm not going to relinquish myself because I don't see what I'm doing as a crime. And anybody who's willing to side with those savages over a white man, I don't respect their opinion either way. And he's like, Jonah's just like, I'm not playing the race card here. I don't care. But, like, I'm here for the bounty. I'm going to take that for you. And he just keeps on making argument after argument, saying, like, it's his God-given right for revenge on his family and blah, 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 blah. And he's just like, dude, you're on the poster. Here it is. I'm going to bring you in. He says, like, yeah. You and your posters. I bet you print them yourself if you could. And you'd be like, oh, I'd probably make a lot more money. So, yeah, probably. And he calls out the point of like, oh, yeah, that's right. You're a legal killer. You like to bring them in dead. But when I do it, all of a sudden it's not allowed anymore. It's completely arbitrary. The lines are drawn wherever the government says that they should be. It's stupid. And he's just like, maybe, but I am on the legal side of this regardless. So finally, this guy calls out being like, Jonah Hex, I do know you. I am aware of your like history and whatnot. You were raised by these savages, weren't you? You were raised by Apache. Is that true? Would you side with them over your own people? And he's just like, I don't side with anybody. I'm on my own. And throughout all this, we see sneaking up behind him is another man with a gun. And he manages to get the drop on Jonah. He's got the gun trained on him, and he's just like, oh yeah, snuck up on him easy. Couldn't have been raised by those savages too much. He didn't learn anything. And turns out that this is the guy's son. And Jonah's like, oh, is all your family fireproof that he managed to survive? And the son's like, none of that was true. That entire revenge story is just complete BS. We do this because we think that because the Civil War ended by this point, we're seeing natives get rights, we're seeing black people get rights, and that sucks. And we would much rather stay at the top of the pyramid where we belong as white men. And Jonah's like, all right, whatever. What do you want me to do then? What are you going to make me do? And he's like, oh, we're going to make you dig your own grave. Go for it. And he starts digging the grave, and they're like, hey, Jonah, I see you got a little tobacco pouch on you. How about you pass that over? We're going to smoke it. And he's just like, whatever, do it. So he passes over the tobacco thing. They roll some cigarettes, and they say, like, yeah, no, like, we're going to go out there. We're going to keep on killing. You're not going to be able to stop us. But all of a sudden, things get a little bit wobbly. And turns out that the tobacco here was laced with something. Whether or not Jonah would actually smoke this himself, who's to say? But these guys were clearly not expecting it. They start seeing Jonah as like this horrible, grotesque-looking monster. And they're like, all right, sorry, we surrender. He's like, nah, I'm not feeling that anymore. And just like you didn't come alone, neither did I. And coming out of the woods around them is a whole bunch of Native Americans. And he's just like, are we hallucinating this? Are they actually there? What's going on, Dad? And the dad's like, no, they're there, man. Try to shoot them. And it's no use. And he's basically allows them to die at the hands of these Native Americans. So Gina hears this story and she's like, dude, what the hell? That was the worst bedtime story I've ever heard in my life. You expect me to fall asleep to that now? And Jonah's just already asleep. He's already passed out. So Jonah she throws a couple of rocks at Jonah's face to wake him up. And he's just like, all right, I'll cuddle up with you, Jesus. So 3 days pass. They're making their way through the desert. Gina's not doing well. She needs some water and food in her. And they finally come across a small little hut. Got some smoke coming out the top. They make their approach. We see it's a Native American who is like, what's your purpose here? What do you want? And Jonah's like, we just need food and water. Respectfully, that's all we need. Clearly she's injured. We need some help. And they make their way inside the hut. There's a young little girl there who presents Gina with a little satchel of water. And as Jonah thanks them for her hospitality, Gina just passes out, falls to the ground. And Jonah looks shocked. Everyone looks shocked. The woman leans down and says, hey, your girl's dead. That's it. She died. And then it says next issue, the return of Tallulah Black. So Gina is dead. it almost feels very mean-spirited, to be honest. It feels like, oh, we went through all of that. She went back in time with Jonah, and then she's just, very first thing, she gets shot, there's no water, she dies. It feels mean-spirited, but like at a certain point, it's almost to be expected because Gina was not prepared for this. She grew up in modern ages. As much as I dislike that it happens, it makes more sense than her being able to survive and become like the next Tallulah Black, you know? So yeah, as much as I dislike that, it works in the context of the story. And I mean, it's kind of weird that we took a little mid-grade, like a flashback / story in there to debate like the race policies of the mid-1800s. I don't know what the purpose of that was, but sure, why not? I'm going to say this one's probably just like flat 7. Because I was at least shocked when it came down to the reveal at the end, so it had something going for it. But for the most part, I think this issue, if it wasn't for the massive consequences of her dying, I think it's pretty much a skippable issue. But yeah, 7 for this. Teen Titans number 29, written by Scott Lobdell and Scott McDaniel, art by Tyler Kirkham. So, last issue, Solstice shot a judge so that she could get a life sentence along with Bart. That happened. So, we pick up with a flashback to the Kolins, Harvest and whatnot, and we see Solstice before she got her look that's so iconic to her now. She's in one of like the gear outfits, and she's being led by this guy named Derek, who's saying like, oh, don't worry, we'll be safe. We don't have to fight anybody around here. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. This is so like awesome that we can do this. And then they get led into a canyon, and all of these monstrous looking guys from the culling come and start attacking Solstice. And she's like, oh no, Derek, what did you do with Derek? And it's like, Derek's betrayed you. That was obvious. Derek betrayed you the whole time. What are you talking about? And he's just like, yeah, sorry, you know how it is. Anyway, kill her, guys. So they start attacking her. She freaks out at the betrayal and whatnot. She does an energy blast, knocks all of them away, killing them, and then gets her new look. Her skin turns pitch black, and she gets like a light cracking out of her. And she's like, oh my god, what have I done? And what's become of me? Oh, I've changed forever. And then Harvest shows up, and he's just like, wow, that was impressive. Anyway, yeah, I'm trying to save all you metahumans. That's the end goal, I guess. Anyway, so we cut to now where both her and Bart are in holding cells. They are in like adjacent so they can see each other, but like separate in that there's a wall between them. And he's just like, you shouldn't have done that, Solstice. That was stupid. You shouldn't have thrown your life away to chase mine. And she's like, you don't understand. You saved me from all that. Remember back in Teen Titans number like 3 when you got me out of that cell? I can't thank you enough for that. And I'm going to follow you no matter where that is because I love you so much. And that's when Red Robin shows up just being like, hey, came to say bye and thank you and all that stuff. And he's like, thank you? What do you mean thank you? And he's like, well, I mean, here's the thing. I don't know your situation. You clearly went through some like really messed up stuff on your homeworld, so maybe I would have done the same thing in your position. But like, regardless, when you were with the Teen Titans back in our time, you were a good hero. You did a good job as Kid Flash. So thanks for that, and I'll always remember you. And he's just like, yeah, so bye, I guess. And then he turns to Solstice, and Solstice's like, don't worry about it. Like, I made my choices. We're good. And he's just like, all right, bye. So the cells then float off of the ship and then separate in space. And as they float apart, they head to their prison where they're going to spend the rest of their lives or whatever. And Red Robin just looks super depressed at this point. Raven comes up and just like, hey, man, you cool? Is everything all right? And he's just like, no, I mean, yes, I'm okay. I'm fine. But like the Teen Titans were meant to give kids like a voice and like allow them to choose their future, but it was never about creating a world where we're free from consequences. So like, yeah, this is This is those consequences catching us to us. And Raven's like, oh my God, you're so much nicer than my dad. And he's just like, yeah, totally. Where's Wonder Girl? And we see Wonder Girl's beating the crap out of some punching bags out in like a gym. And she's like, are they gone? Did they go to the prison? And he's just like, yeah, they're gone. And she's like, what in the hell are the Teen Titans even doing anyway? Superboy was like in the future. Remember Skitter? What happened to her? We suck at keeping team members. And he's just like, yeah, but you know, there's no guarantees in life. Like, everyone's got to find their own path. And maybe it's time for you and me to find our own path. You know what I'm saying? And so they share a kiss. They're all that. And she's like, all right, go ahead. Say how you feel. And he's like, I've always had a crush on you. And now that, like, we're the only remaining members, basically, of the Teen Titans, not counting Raven, why don't we give it a shot? Let's do this, you know? Let's go for it. So they head back to the Echo complex, and it's like, all right, we'll send you back in time. Usually we just point the arrow at the early 21st century and say there. We've never been this specific before, so we don't know exactly when you guys are going to pop out. But we're trying to make it as soon as you guys left, right after Forever Evil, because we can't send you back during Forever Evil, because that would mess everything up. So right after Forever Evil. And they're like, cool, thanks. So they get teleported back. We see, before they arrive back, Bunker and Beast Boy are just fighting against these weird shadow demons. And they're just like, Christ, where are our teammates? Where are the Teen Titans? And then they zoom in, and it's like, oh, thank God they're here. And so they immediately start fighting. Red Robin's like, hey, guys, what the hell is all this? And he's like, well, in a word, it's the end of the world. And he points up, and we see the goddamn Light and Darkness twin people that were from, like, issue, I'm pretty sure, when did this trade start? 24. So it would have been in, like, issue 20. 10 issues ago. This was when Raven got introduced. We dropped these guys as a plot line, and now they're here. God damn it, Lobdell. And the worst part is, next issue, the return of Skitter. Okay. This is the second to last issue, not counting an annual that's going to be in there as well. So this is wrapping up Teen Titans. I know we get a reboot, a relaunch of it, like almost immediately afterwards, but it's a different writer. This is the last of Scott Lobdell stuff. God damn it. Like, here's the thing. This issue itself may have been fine. Like, I actually like the idea of Robin being retrospective and, like, looking back on, like, yeah, the Teen Titans kind of, like, we set out what we wanted to do, but, like, we had to give up everything to do that. That sounds great to me. That's a good idea for wrapping up your series. But then to come back with it and say, we're bringing back Skitter. We're bringing back the Light and Dark guys. We're bringing back Bunker. I'm like, just go out. Just say, and thus was the end of the Teen Titans. You don't need to do all of these drop plot lines that you had months and months and months ago. For God's sake. So yeah, it's like a 10. I love it. No, this is like a... Here's the thing. I like the concept of it. So it is difficult for me to rate it because I like this introspective stuff. But I'm going to say it's... because of how it ended, it just pisses me off that much more. I'm going to say this is a 6. That's the highest I could possibly give it, and it is fighting for that 6. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the final issues. I think we get Superboy back in some regard. We'll see. Who cares? And that's it. That's all the comics that DC Comics put out this March 26th, 2014. And I'm going to be honest with you, this episode's gone a little bit longer than I would have liked it to, and I just don't have the energy to put much into this ending. So I'm just going to say the comics that are coming out next week, and we'll call it quits from there. So next week, we've got, in no particular order, Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, The Movement, Stormwatch, Phantom Stranger, and Swamp Thing. But in addition to that, we got a brand new #1, and it is Aquaman and the Others. Very bold of you, DC, to put out a second Aquaman book. That's never going to happen again. Additionally, in that, Stormwatch, I believe we're on the final issue of that. That's the end of it. And, honestly, I think that's the only thing important. We've finally hit post tie-ins all the time territory. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I know I'm going to have more ability to read things because I don't have to keep on checking in on some other book of what happened last time. Sorry, I'm still a little bit bitter about that World's Finest debacle of, oh, we just forgot to publish part 3. Oops, check in a month. Come on, DC. Anyway, if you have any comments on anything that I reviewed this week, last week, any week at all, go ahead and hit me up on any of the social media platforms that we've actually managed to stick around on. That includes Discord, Reddit, Patreon, if you consider that a social media place. All the links to those things are in the description, but that's going to do it for me. I will see you next week for the issue 30s. And, yeah, always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.